A PhD student at UNC was involved in a story that was recently named a Pulitzer Prize finalist for exposing the horrible suffering some of our U.S. military veterans are facing and the questions over how the Department of Defense is responding. It all centers around this: artillery rounds being blasted from powerful long-range cannons. This is video of our U.S. military troops blasting artillery rounds in Iraq. I'm about to play you video from Mosul in 2017, and I want you to pay attention to how close these service members are to the powerful long-range cannons when it blasts. Now I want you to think about them hearing that blast over and over and over again, up to 100 rounds a day. That was the reality for some men and women who we sent overseas after 9/11 to fight the Islamic State. These troops had to fire tens of thousands of high explosive shells, hearing that brain-rattling boom every time. Blast overpressure is the technical term for the injury caused by the effect of the blast wave on the body, which includes traumatic brain injuries. UNC PhD student Daniel Johnson, who you see here, was with the unit blasting those heavy artillery batteries in 2016. He wrote an article last year about how his comrades who suffered blast overpressure experienced mental health conditions such as depression and PTSD and died by suicide. He later contributed to a Pulitzer finalist New York Times article, which gets even more grim. Veterans said they were seeing ghosts and having psychotic delusions. Traumatic brain injuries don't stop with the Iraq War. The Department of Defense estimates that in 2022 alone, there were 22,478 cases in the military of some sort of traumatic brain injury. Last month, lawmakers in Washington introduced bipartisan legislation to enact a variety of measures to help mitigate and protect service members from blast overpressure. Representative Tom Tillis from North Carolina is one of the bill's co-sponsors. Daniel Johnson from UNC has been lending his expertise to these lawmakers trying to enact that policy change. Joining us now, thank you so much for being with us here in studio tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You contributed to or wrote the articles that I referenced, exposing the mental health issues that are associated with traumatic brain injury. Is the DoD connecting that blast overpressure to some of the symptoms that you reference in your articles?
Not quite, but they're getting there. The connection between these occupations and exposure to blast and suicide is pretty new. I only just discovered that information in March and recently wrote about it. And it's really important for a state like North Carolina due to our large veterans population and the fact that thousands of service members in these occupations are stationed at Fort Liberty and Camp Lejeune.
Right.
And it's a massive, massive issue. We're talking upwards of 10, 20, maybe 30,000 troops in the U.S. Army alone who are at risk.
Yeah, a year, right? I mean, the numbers are striking. And we know that there have been efforts by Congress before to force the Pentagon to really address this, improve its monitoring of our service members who suffered traumatic brain injuries. You say in your reporting that those efforts really didn't go very far.
No. I mean, there's still no way to track blast overpressure exposure medical records. Equipment that can monitor blast overpressure is still not being issued widely to units, and there's still lack of policies and regulations throughout the DoD. One of the big issues here is that if we want to prevent this from happening to the next generation of service members, like what happened to me and my friends, these things have to happen. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why I started writing these articles.
Yeah, no kidding. And they're clearly getting attention. Senator Elizabeth Warren has introduced legislation. It's received a whole bunch of bipartisan support. That was just issued last month. Where do things stand with this legislation? And maybe tell us what it's all about, because I know that you have been intimately involved in educating some of these lawmakers about blast overpressure and a lot of the injuries that are associated with it.
The legislation as it stands now should be in this year's National Defense Authorization Act, which is important because this act has been passed every year for the past 70 to 75 years. Really what it calls for is for blast exposure to be tracked in troops' medical histories, for more training of DoD medical professionals to identify these injuries, is for people in these occupations like artillery to be notified of these risks.
So one more time, just tell us again, so this legislation is likely to be in the Defense Reauthorization Act, is that what it's called?
Yes, the National Defense Authorization Act.
And that is pretty much consistently, from your research, consistently approved in Congress. So we're likely to see some more pressure. But will it actually get picked up in the Pentagon, and will it actually, enact change? Are you optimistic?
I think with news coverage about the issue in the past year, the Pentagon has changed a lot of the policies. Public awareness will help this change actually be followed and enacted.
Daniel Johnson, thank you so much for all of your reporting, and congratulations contributing to a Pulitzer finalist article.
Thank you.
Dan?